Hello everyone and welcome back to the first match of the semifinals of the Magnus Invitational. It's Fabiano Caruana versus Hikaru Nakamura. After 4 games of the Rapid, the match was tied and they now go into a Blitz mini match. Now Fabiano lost the first Blitz game and this is the second one. So Fabiano again in a must-win situation. He has the white pieces. Will he be able to force another Blitz mini match? But before we check that out, I would just like to congratulate and thank everyone for joining the tournament yesterday, and here are the winners of yesterday's tournament. So first, the Medo Arena. So for players who are rated below 1700, these are the top 10 with Was Up Antonio, New Era 1000, and Ivanesco winning the tournament by winning top 3 places. And in the main event, the Agadmator Friday Arena, we have these top 10 gentlemen. Blue Wolf, International Master Leon Livaich, Devils 1908, Anui 1432, Peki1 Creative Genius, Bruno Pavcevic, Rebov Michal 2002, and Checkmater 47, with Blue Wolf 2 surprising everyone and finishing in first place ahead of International Master Leon Livaich. So it was a lot of fun, and over 2,000 players joined us. So we'll see if we can beat that next Friday. So once again, thank you all for joining, and hope you get even better results next time. Now, getting back to the match, Fabi opens with e4. We have e5 by Nakamura, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4. Fabi again goes for the Italian, and there is something that Magnus mentioned during the live stream, that out of the two of them, he thinks that Hikaru speaks better Italian. And he goes for bishop to c5, the Giuoco Piano, and this time b4 the Evans Gambit was also not played, which is a shame, but we have castles by Fabi. And okay, knight to f6, continuing with the Giuoco Piano, we have d3, and now the standard Giuoco Piano stuff, d6, we have c3, h6, rook to e1, and now just castles. I will often mention that knight to g4 doesn't really do anything, since white is very happy with rook to e2. So castles, and then now h3, not allowing anything to land on g4. We have a5, grabbing some space on the queen side, also making room for the dark square bishop on a7 if needed. And now knight b to d2. The knight is coming to f1 and later to g3. We have bishop to b6, not allowing any breakthroughs to come with an attack on the bishop. And now knight to f1. We have knight to e7, and now knight to g3. So both players just improving the position of their knights. And there is one game in the database where knight to g6 was played, but here Hikaru goes for bishop to e6, and it is as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. So bishop captures on e6, we have f captures on e6, and now just d4. So Fabi needs to win to keep the match alive. Hikaru is very happy with a draw. E captures on d4, we have c captures, and now knight to g6. So Hikaru says, my pieces are very well placed, you're the one who needs a win, you do something. So bishop to e3, Fabi continues development, and now a4 by Nakamura. We have queen to c2, and now queen to e8. We have a3, and then now d5, striking in the center, where Fabi can either capture and play against this isolated e6 pawn, which he doesn't like. Instead, he goes e5. He grabs more space in the center. We have knight to d7, and now knight to d2, preparing to also start expanding with the f pawn if needed. We have bishop to a5 now, pinning that knight as the rook is on e1, and now rook e to c1, putting pressure on the c file, and here, as the e5 pawn is overloaded, just c5, attacking the base of the pawn chain, the defender of the e5 pawn. So here, Fabi captures, and now Nakamura just grabs the e5 pawn. Now knight g captures on e5, and rook back to f1. We have knight back to c6, and all of a sudden it's Nakamura who has the very strong center, and it's questionable if Fabi will be able to keep an eye on the c5 pawn. So b4 here, either forcing the bishop to move all the way back, or what Nakamura did, a captures on b3 en passant, and now knight captures on b3, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back to c7, and now knight to d4. We have bishop to e5 first, putting more pressure on the knight here, and now knight g to e2, adding a defender. We have rook to a5, adding now yet another attacker to the c5 pawn, and here Fabi has to trade to keep his c5 pawn. So we have knight captures on c6, b captures on c6, and now rook to a2. as his rook on a1 is under attack, and you also need to keep an eye on the a3 pawn. So queen to e7, and Nakamura just adds a third attacker to the c5 pawn, and rook to c1, adding a third defender here. And now rook f to a8, going after the a3 pawn now. So a4, now that the rook and the queen are defending it, we have bishop to f6. Now Hikaru just makes room for the e pawn to start marching forward, then d4 is coming, and it's not at all clear how Fabi will keep this game going. We have rook to a3 by Fabi, and now just e5. We have knight to g3, and now queen to e6. We have queen to g6, now pinning the bishop here since the queen on e6 is undefended, but just d4. Now Nakamura starts pushing his central pawns. Bishop to d2 attacks the rook, and just rook captures on a4. So Fabi gives up the a4 pawn to try and create some attacking chances. Rook captures, we have rook captures, and now knight to e4. Getting the knight also into the attack. If you go for bishop captures on h6, it seems like you win a pawn, but after knight to f8, kicking back the queen, you don't really have a good square for the queen. This is taken, so once you move the queen, you just lose the bishop. So first, knight to e4, you add another attacker into the attack, of course, and now just knight to f8. Nakamura kicks back Fabiano's queen. Queen to g3, and now king to h7, not having to worry about any bishop captures on h6 action in the future. And now rook to b1 by Fabi. Now he wants to go for a nice rook lift with rook to b7 or rook to b8. It depends on what black plays. So rook to a7, Nakamura prevents rook to b7, and now queen to d3, threatening a lot of nasty discoveries after the knight moves. So king back to g8, and only now rook to b8, now pinning the knight here. We have bishop to e7, now defending the knight and also not allowing any knight captures on f6 in the future, and the queen to f3 now. It's a very strong square for the queen, so of course Nakamura kicks it away. Queen to f7, and now queen to g3. Again goes for the e5 pawn, and again with some bishop captures on h6 action happening. So queen back to e6, guarding against both threats, and now rook to e8, pinning this bishop. We have king back to h7 by Nakamura, and here Fabi goes back, rook to b8. But here, there is a move for white that is so good and so complicated that no one would be able to play it. Even you, if you pause the video right now, I doubt that you would be able to find it. But if you want, I'm not going to stop you. You're welcome to pause the video and try to find it. It's one of the most difficult moves I've ever seen. So, you know, yeah, do your thing if you must. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, as this is just one of those moves that no one finds. I mean no one. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen to f3. Yes, and now it seems like black is in sort of a zugzwang. There's no good move for black to be made here, and it's very difficult to make a move. For example, if you try to move the knight, let's say knight g6, then just knight to g5 check wins the game, because, well, you either win the queen, but you're not even interested in the queen, because the black king has nowhere to go. The back rank is covered. If you capture with the bishop, you lose the queen here, and if you capture with the pawn, it's just queen to h5 mate. So you're not moving the knight. You can't move the bishop because the queen is under attack. If you try moving the queen, let's say queen d5, then you just get rook captures on e7. You just give up the rook for two pieces, captures, captures, and captures. And now, of course, you still can't capture because of captures. And after the rook attacks queen, you just go queen e8. Again, if captures, you're going to capture the rook. And once the rook moves, queen, rook to b7 or d7, you're just going to defend your knight with f3. And you continue this game having a bishop and a knight for a rook with a better game for white. So this is, like I said, one of those moves that you simply don't find. It's there, but unless you're like really focused and you really know that there are some problems here and that there's sort of a zugzwang for black, you just don't play this. So Fabi instead went for rook to b8, but now we have knight to d7. Now the knight can move. We have queen to d3, again trying some nasty discoveries, and now queen to g6. Of course, preventing this, we have rook to c8 now, putting pressure on the c6 pawn, and there is a huge threat here. For example, if black, let's say, makes a move, something like rook to a2, doesn't really matter, then rook captures on c6 is deadly, because after queen captures here, you just have knight f6 check, king has to move as it's a double check, and only move is king h8, queen to h7 is mate. So this is Fabi's idea behind rook to c8. However, Hikaru, the puzzle rush genius, immediately spots it and he defends against it with knight to f8. But Fabi didn't realize that knight to f8 actually defended against the threat, and here, instead of just f3, defending the knight and continuing the game, as Fabi is better here, Fabi played rook captures on c6 nonetheless, and Hikaru just grabbed that rook, and Fabi was just, what's happening here? He couldn't believe it. And now the problem is knight f6 check doesn't do anything, because after king h8 there is no mate. The knight covers the h7 square. So after rook captures on c6, Hikaru just grabbed it, and now knight to g5. Again, a double check. Fabi tried a few more moves, knight f7 check, king to g8, and now knight captures on e5, attacking the queen. But Nakamura just moves the queen. He's now up a whole rook. He doesn't care about anything. We have bishop to f4, and now just bishop captures on c5. And it was in this position that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as he is down a whole rook. So yeah, really tough break for Fabi. Getting back into the match, again, blunder in a promising position, but yeah, that's it's just that Hikaru is extremely good in blitz, and some would even say the best, as he is now in the finals of the Magnus Invitational, and today we have Magnus versus Ding to see who will face Hikaru in the finals. And as Magnus said, this is the first time in some 10 years that he doesn't feel like a favorite going into the match against Ding Liren. So we'll see what happens there, and will he continue with all the Vienna games and the King's Gambits and the h5 Rosolimos, or will we see some real chess? So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Nakamura is in the final, so we'll see what happens. I would like to thank Vijay Santana, Robert Krechmar, Jeff Graves, Sochi Chuan, and Owen Perez for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Magnus Invitational until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Saturday, and do join us in the Lichess Team Battle Arena. The links are in the description. See you soon.